Bueno, my dear people. So today we're
Hello,
going
teacher. Can you hear me?
I hear you now. Yeah,
Oh
great.
my God, I don't know what happened.
I don't know.
Now, my earphones or my headphones
Hmm.
was were unplugged.
Ah, okay. No, that's that's the reason
Yeah,
why.
sorry.
No worries, all fine. Bueno, my dear. So, guys, today we're going to continue with the second class of the week, number three. The last time we talked about a little bit of the communication, and then we described different options that we have for introducing sentences. No, then sometimes depending what we want to emphasize, we use one structure or the other. Sometimes we use the infinitive structure. Sometimes we use the gerund structure in order to emphasize different parts of the conversation. But today we're going to continue talking about like communication, conversation, and the idea is that we're going to talk about something that it's called storytelling. Of course, storytelling it's related to communication because storytelling, well, of course, it's telling something to the other people, communicate something, especially stories, anecdotes, and so on, right? The last questions that we have the last time, they were directed a little bit on that way, no? So you said, okay, what stories are typical in your family, huh? And what was the last gossip that you hear at home? So we were kind of introducing the topic of storytelling, yes? So, which is really important because in this case, storytelling is going to help us to manage perfectly the past tenses. Ready? When we talk about storytelling, usually we are going to use the past tense, but not only the simple past, all the past tenses to create the complete and the perfect story. Okay? So, we're going to start today reading one example. Let me just show it here. We're going to start here reading an example of what a complete story is. Okay, so Mrs. Lau, we're going to read, like from point to point, from period to period. So Laura starts here and finishes here where it says fossil. Ready? So go ahead, my dear Lau.
Okay. It already started a couple of weeks ago when some scientists from the Ike of New Zealand found a new discovery related to the field of genetics while they were studying a new piece of bone from a caveman fossil.
Caveman. Exactly, from a caveman fossil. Questions in vocabulary. Do you know what is the meaning of caveman?
No.
Sounds like Hombre de las Cavernas.
Hombre de las cavernas. So you know what the our ancestors, I forgot the Homo erectus and like all the Neanderthal and so on, right? So the caveman. Very good. Any other question in vocabulary? Scientists, ICT, no?
Yeah, ICT.
ICT, yes.
ICT, it's as an acronym, which it's like Institute of I don't of Scientific Technology or something like that. But it's like three different letters, like an acronym, that it's the name of the New Zealand institution, como institution of it is it's genetic studies or something like that. Of course, it's not those words, but it's just the name of the institution. Okay, no worries. And bueno, genetics is that. So, Nico, go ahead. Now it's your turn from here, from day until bloodline.
Okay. They found that your ancestors have a lot to do with the way your feeding habits develop. They have been running a lot of tests in order to determine if it's only related to male or both parts of your bloodline.
Very good. So they say they, of course, the scientists, they found that your ancestors have a lot to do with the way your feeding habits develop. So it's related your ancestors and how they eat, and now in the nowadays, right? How your feeding habits develop. Do you know what is the meaning of feeding habits?
No.
Alimentar hábitos.
Hábitos alimenticios. Hábitos
Ah,
alimenticios.
okay.
Exactly, right?
Alimentación.
Muy bien. So in that case, how your feeding habits develop, and so far until this moment, they have been running a lot of tests in order to determine pronunciation, determine if it is only related to the male or both parts of your bloodline. Bloodline, of course, it means la línea sanguínea. It means your ancestors in the same family. Ready? Muy bien. The last part it says, what you need to know is that other teams have failed to understand the nature of the feeding heritage. What is the meaning of heritage?
Herencia, el
Herencia, muy
legado.
bien, exactly. So what they call feeding heritage, which is like herencia alimenticia. So in this case, the idea is that we are reading a story. It's kind of a story news, right? It's the same. When we talk about the storytelling, we are going to have a lot of different possibilities. Maybe we can talk about an anecdote that happened to me in my daily life, right? Maybe I can talk about a gossip that I listen from other person. Or maybe I can talk about something like at this part, which is a story, but it is actually a piece of news, right? Nevertheless, it's something that I can tell as a story, right? So in this case, we're going to have different kinds of elements in order to connect all the parts together. So, for example, in purple, we find out some connectors, no? Like it all started when, yeah, connector for starting a conversation, yeah. Also, we find, for example, the connector when. It's a connector for introducing more information and especially specifying one action in one specific moment. No, that's another. Also, for example, here we have what you need to know, which is an expression, but it's an expression that is used for connecting two ideas and introducing other information related to the previous information. Yeah. And of course, in red, you can find a lot of different tenses, no? For example, here we have found, which is simple past. Also, we talk about were studying, which is past continuous, right? Also, we talk about have failed, which is present perfect simple. And also, we talk about have been running, which is present perfect continuous, no? So one story, depending on the nature of the story, can be created or can be introduced only with simple past, for example. Or sometimes we introduce other elements like, for example, by past continuous. Or even though it's also possible to include some other times actions or elements of the story with present perfect and present perfect continuous. So the idea of today is that we can realize in what case we can use all of those elements, right? And how can we get together all of that in order to create like a complete story, okay? So first of all, we got to go over the review of the different tenses that we can manage, right? The first difference that we got to manage is the past continuous versus the simple past, right? We know that the past continuous is a key element when we are talking about storytelling. Why? Because the past continuous is going to help me to introduce the general context of the story. What was going on when the situation happened? For example, in the example of the fossil discovering, it happened while they were running, they were making some studies or something like that, or while they're running some tests. So, but in that case, that is the general context. What was going on? What was happening when the situation happened or when the story happened? Yeah. So the past continuous is generally used at the beginning of the sentence for talking about what was the person or what was the subject doing in the moment that the action happened, right? And of course, it's going to be normally accompanied with the simple past because the simple past is usually used for introducing the next action. So when I mention the next action, it's what happened after. When we are talking about a story, the most common question is, okay, and what happened after that? And then what happened? Yes, and after that, what happened? The next action, or the action that I'm going to introduce after the other, it's usually introduced with the simple past. For example, they were running some tests, blah, 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 and they found some relation between the fossil and da, da, da. That found, which is simple past, it's going to introduce the action that happened afterwards. So I said before that an story can be told only with simple past if I want. Yes. If I tell a story, let me just, a ver, come on, go ahead. Yeah, that's it. So if I want to use just a story in the chronological order, I can do it only with simple past. For example, I can say that first I found my friends, then we went to the bar, and finally we came back home at 3 a.m. I told a short story, of course, it's shorter, but I only used simple past. Why? Because I am talking about the chronological order. So I am just telling the story as it happened. First, I found my friends. Second, we went to the bar. And finally, we came back. Sorry. Finally, we came back at home at 3 a.m. So I go in the chronological order. I only need to use simple past, and it's a possibility. But of course, for example, here it lacks a lot of information. Le falta un poco de información, right? For making more complete. In that case is where I'm going to try to use the other past, for example, the past continuous, yeah, for describing other things or for giving more details, no? So in that case, I can say like, once I was working, no, no, I was working in my office when I received a surprise call, comma. Then I introduced everything TTD, and then I said, bueno, no sé, next, I found my friends and ta ta ta, and then it's only, I mean, all related, but it's all with a context. So now it's not only like, ah, see, I did this and then that. No, no. I introduce with the past continuous another context for giving more details to the information, ¿no? So now it's not only like, ah, sí, hicimos esto y luego hicimos esto. No, qué estaba haciendo, qué estaba pasando cuando eso empezó a suceder, right? Entonces, that's the difference between past continuous. Ya sabemos que past continuous is going to be used with verb to be, was were, sorry, was or were plus the verb in ing, yes? And, well, the simple past, it's verb in past, went, did, had, or the verb that you need to use, right? As we have two different tenses, usually we are going to find different connectors. Connectors like, for example, when or why. Okay? Usually, not always 100% of the time, but usually when it's followed by the simple past. So normally I follow this structure. Past continuous when simple past. For example, I was working in my office when I received a call. Yeah? Or I can do it first the simple past while and then the past continues. For example, with the example of the New Zealand team, I said, wait, chan, 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 we said they found, yes, they found a new discovery while they were studying, yes, a new piece of bone. So in that case, the simple past while past continues. It's the same idea, but depends on how do you want to express it. Yeah. So, sorry, the most important sentence or the most important action goes first. And then I introduce the context if it's not so important. Or if I want to start with the context, it's fine. And then I use when and then the second action. Ready? So, guys, so far, any question with the difference between past continuous and simple past, or it's clear?
No, teacher, is clear for now.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah, it's a little review. We good. So, guys, normally most of the actions in a story are presented with simple past. This past continuous, it's only for specific cases, like the general context or an action that was long and was interrupted. Yes. But normally the actions presented in a story are with simple past, right? Of course, that we have other elements, like for example, the past perfect. The past perfect that is when I went back in a story, went to a previous action, right? For example, I said, okay, once I was working in my office when I received a surprise call. Next, I found my friends, and then we went to the bar, and finally we came back home because because we had drunk too much. When I use past perfect, which is had and the verb in past participle, we had drunk too much. Of course, that you know that it's an action that happened previously, right? So in that case, for example, I said, because we had drunk too much, we said, had drunk too much when? Before we went back to the house, right? So in that case, that is the other moment, which is using past perfect in a specific moments, not really common, but in specific moments for talking about an action that happened before other action in the past. ¿Mm? Entonces, el pasado realmente es, digamos que fácil de usar porque son acciones que ya finalizaron todas. ¿Ready? Algunas largas, algunas cortas, algunas antes que otras, algunas después de otras, pero siempre voy a estar manejando esos tres pasados, ¿right? Pero normalmente una historia, o bueno, a veces una historia se acaba en el pasado, pero a veces no. Sometimes it continues until the present. For example, the news. Yes. In the example of the news, in the example of the story, in this story, they say they have been running a lot of tests. ¿Cuándo? Until this moment. Since the moment that they found the discovery until this moment. And the action continues. So I can not only use the simple past or the past perfect or the past continuous. I also have to include the present perfect and the present perfect continuous. So what is the difference between the present perfect and the present perfect continuous, right? You know that both actions are actions that started in the past and continues until the present. Ready? But there is a difference. When I use present perfect simple, the action possibly happened in different moments, but separated. For example, I said, I have worked in many places. Yes, but not continuously. I work in one place in 2012, in another place in 2015, in another place in 2020. But it was not continuously, right? So I use present perfect simple. Okay, I have worked in many different places. Of course, in this moment, I continue working. That's why I said I have worked in different places because today I continue working. But if it's an action that was uninterrupted, that was continuous from the moment that it started until the present, there is the moment when I use present perfect continuous. The present perfect continuous, remember that it's going to be have or has, then been, siempre been, and then the verb in ing. In this case, for example, I have been working here for 3 years. So for the last 3 years, I have been working here uninterruptedly. Yeah. So that's a different thing. Yeah. Because in that case, when the action is not or was not interrupted during that time, then I can use the present perfect continuous. Right. But the action must be like, of course, no interruptions during all that time. Hmm? Sometimes the actions, one expression can be like used in both sentences and it can be fine, but most of the times we have to find the correct one. Yeah. Example, let's say here. Oh my God, I erased it here. So we said, okay, I want to describe that in my life, yes, I have had, do you remember what is hangover?
Guayao.
Watch out, yes, very good. So in that case, we said, okay, in my life, like muchas veces he tenido guayabo. Do you think that that is present perfect or present perfect continuous?
Present perfect.
Simple, ¿cierto? Present perfect simple. Porque
Mhm,
it's
simple.
not continuous, right? So I said, I have had many hangovers, many hangovers in my life. Yes. But ahora voy a decir que desde ese día me he estado sintiendo terriblemente, right? Pero es desde ese día sin interrupción hasta ahora. Present perfect simple, present perfect continuous.
Present perfect continuous.
Present perfect continuous. So in that case, I said, okay, I have had many hours in my life, but since that day, I have been feeling horribly. Sorry, horribly. Yeah. And notice that in that moment, I bring the story that started in the past, I bring it, some consequences of the story until the present. Yeah. So in this story that it's so short, yes, it's only 5 lines, I already use past continuous. I already use simple past, many different simple past. Yes, when, came back, ready? I also include past perfect, had drunk, yeah, and I even included some actions until the present, simple, present perfect, simple, and present perfect continuous, right? Entonces, we have to use all of these elements in order to tell a story right, because depends on the element was long, short, is already finished, it still continues, then we can have a lot of different possibilities to use or to talk about the story, sorry, or to express the story. Ready? How do you feel here? Questions about it, difficulties? It's a short review, but I don't know, questions?
It's clear, teacher.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a review.
Good. It's a short review. Nico, good,
A
fine.
short review.
Yes, teachers. Good.
Great, excellent. So those elements, they need to be connected, of course. No, it's pretty clear that we have to connect all of those stories, all of those elements, because if not, it would be something like this, like a story different in different elements. No, like okay, the first action, the COVID was discovered, the COVID had arrived to Colombia, my salary came down. Well, a lot of different elements of the story. But if I don't connect them, it's not a story. It's only a bunch of sentences alone. Yeah. But I need to connect these sentences, ready? On the way that I want. Remember, there is not only one way to do it. There are many different ways, depends on you. Do you want to say first, for example, here I could say that the COVID arrived to, sorry, the COVID was discovered, yeah, and then the COVID arrived to Colombia in 2020, and then my salary came down in April if that's how I want it. But for example, in this case, I preferred saying like the COVID it was discovered in China in 2019, and then the COVID, sorry, and then my salary came down because the COVID had arrived to Colombia. So three elements, the same elements, but I decide how to organize them. Ready? Inside a story is exactly the same. If you want to start by the end, it's fine. If you want to start by the summary of the story, it's fine. Yes. But for doing all of that, we have a lot of different connectors to use. Ready? So, guys, when we talk about connecting ideas, especially in past, we are going to require different kinds of connectors. Yeah. First, we require connectors as time adverbs. Yeah. Depend on the actions that we want to connect. Until, by the time, once, the moment, first, after, you know. So depends on that. For example, until you said, okay, you know what? I hadn't had hangover. If we continue with the story of my friends, I hadn't had hangover until I drank tequila. It's an example, right? So in that case, guys, this until is connecting to ideas. Similar to what it was doing it when and why in similar way, but here we are using until because it's a different kind of relation. Ya no es cuando tomé tequila, sino hasta que yo tomé tequila, right? So that's why the connectors are going to vary so much. Also, in a story, it's essential that we learn how to create sequencers or sequence adverbs, which are like these ones. For example, to begin with, of course, is to start, yes. Following, to introduce more information, right after or right before to go forward or to go backwards, finally to close the story. Yes. And then we have others like, for example, next, like after that, like, for example, after that, sorry. Like, for example, then, which is pretty common. ¿Cierto? No, we went to the party and then we went back to our houses. So using these sequencers in a story, especially, it's going to help me to give specificity to my story. What happened before, what happened after, and so on, right? We can have also summary linking words or summary connectors in order to like give the general idea of my story. So I said, no, you know what? In short, I am not going to drink for a while, or in short, I am not going to go out with my friends anymore, or something like that. For giving like a conclusion to sum up, to conclude, to make a long story short, which is a very common expression. To make a long story short, it's para resumir, para no hacer el cuento largo, right? Other different kinds of connectors. And of course that we have our adverbs, in this case, certainty adverbs, which are usually finished with "ly". Do you remember what is the meaning of the words that finish with "ly" in Spanish?
Normalmente.
Exactly, Nicolas, very good. Like definitivamente, obviamente, indudablemente, seguramente, so on, so on, so on, right? So these adverbs, of course, they give me also the opportunity to introduce more like clearness about my intentions. no, I want to make a concrete affirmation. So I said, definitely it was the worst party of my life or something like that. Yes, it can work as a connector, but at the same time, it gives more pragmatic sense to my sentences. Okay. So these connectors, of course, they are going to work in different ways, but more or less, this is like a big picture of all the connectors that we have. We have connectors of all different kinds, and it's important that you learn how to use them. Okay? Remember that normally we have two possibilities to connect ideas. The first one is that we use normally sentence number one, the connector in the middle, and then sentence number two. Also, it's a possibility that we use the connector first, using the sentence number one separated with a comma and the sentence number two. Those are like the two most common structures for connecting ideas. Ready? For example, these ones of conclusion, they usually go in this structure. So you say, to sum up, I was suffering a lot when I wake up, for example, right? Also, the adverbs, they usually go in first position. Usually, but it's not a strict rule. You can change it, depends on you, right? And also, for example, these time adverbs, they can go like this in the first structure, in the second one. So it's kind of flexible, right? So guys, the idea is that we introduce as many connectors as we can for giving or for telling a story, right? Okay. Guys, do you have any questions on these connectors or it's fine? No, all good? Yes,
Yet, you're good.
good. Great, excellent, very good. So, of course, that in addition to these ones, we're going to have other time adverbs, yes, especially, for example, when we use past perfect, present perfect or present perfect continuous, like for example, for, just, lately, never, since, still, yet. These expressions are usually with perfect tenses, no? So when we said, for example, I have been doing this for so much time, ¿cierto? Or I have never done that, or I have been doing this lately, or I have, no sé, I have been working for this company since I was 30 years old, something like that, right? These expressions, these adverbs are mostly used with perfect tenses, present perfect continuous, present perfect simple, right? The others, the ones like, for example, the moment, when, after, before, they are more used with simple past. Ready? The perfect tenses, they have specific expressions of time because they have one particular characteristic, and is that they are not specific in time. So these expressions of time, they are not specific in time. What they say is that, for example, aún o ya o por tanto tiempo o desde tal momento, but not specifically one moment in the time, different from the other expressions that use the simple past. Okay? Bueno, my dear people. So, wait a second, we have gone here. Well, this is about the time adverbs, but I'm going to show you a lot of different expressions that we have. Oh, sorry. In order to tell me, well, you have to tell me if these expressions are for starting a conversation. Yes, we have different options. First, starting a story. Yeah. Also, second, like go or continue, like it's add more information. What we said, add more information. Ready? Or, but the other option it would be closing the story. Yeah. So I'm going to read the expression and then you tell me what's the use that you believe that it's right for that expression. For example, I will never forget the time. What is the option? What is the use of that expression?
When you want to tell us about to remember or a history, I
A
don't know,
memory, ¿cierto? But
a
do you think it's
memory
for starting or for closing or for add more information?
starting.
Starting information, of course, this is number one, number two, and number three. Right? So of course, that is for the starting information. Muy bien. The thing that you have to know is
Add more
add more
information.
information.
Yes.
Exactly. No? So it's like I am connecting a previous information with what I'm going to tell like next. Next one, it says it all started when.
Mm.
Starting.
Starting.
It
Yeah,
started, of
starting.
course, right? Muy bien. What happened was
Mm,
Add more information or
Starting.
could be
starting,
both.
yes.
I think that it could be both, the starting and adding more information, no? Because in that case, I can say, no, what happened was that, but I can also connect similarly to the thing that you have to know is here, similar, you can say, what happened was that, but connecting with the previous information. Good. I forgot to mention that.
Closing.
Not really much, so as adding
Add.
more information. Yes, so
Okay.
good, exactly. Meanwhile,
Just
Add more information.
add
add more
more.
information. Very good. And in the end,
And
Closing.
yeah, yeah,
in the
closing.
end, it's closing, of course. Very good. That reminds me of when
Add.
add, yes, add information. Also for the starting information,
Starting,
sometimes
yes.
could be also, yes. The next thing we knew,
Mm, add.
of course, add more information. Like, no, we don't know what happened, but the next thing we knew, it's that, whatever, no? Later on, so later on,
So later on, starting. No?
Now add information.
add
Add
information. Yeah. So
information.
here requires a previous information, and then we say that after that. So it's like later on. Good.
Okay.
Very good. Make a long story short,
Add more information
Yeah.
or closing.
closing. That's the
Cl-
one. Very good. Exactly. I have got to tell you about
Starting.
starting. Very
Closing,
good.
yes.
Uh-huh. The other thing is
The other thing is add.
Add, maybe.
obviously very good. And finally, bueno, so finally,
Closing.
Closing.
of course, closing information. So look that in addition to the connectors, after finally, we have other expressions like compound expressions that also they do the same thing. What they do is connecting information in different ways, but not only one verb, well, sorry, not only one word, like once or before or after, but compound expressions that they do exactly the same job. Okay? So guys, you have a lot of different resources in order to connect stories. Ready? In addition to these connectors, we have the connectors that we saw the last time. However, nevertheless, even though, although, despite, in spite of, on the other hand, right? This level, the level intermediate 2, is focused a lot in connecting ideas. The tenses are almost clear, no? Most of them we know how to use simple past, present perfect. We already know that, right? Now, what we are learning here is how to connect all of those elements together. And for that reason, well, we have to include all of these elements. The adverbs of time, the connectors, the transitions, and for example, these expressions for introducing or starting or closing the story. Okay? Bueno, guys, so I said that these stories can be things like, for example, news and anecdotes that I tell by myself. Yes. For example, the story of the fossil. But I said also that it can be a gossip, something that somebody told me, right? So in that case, guys, in addition to this part, we gotta remember a little bit the report speech. Maybe you have seen in your activities that there is a little unit about report speech, right? Remember that the report speech is repeating what other people said. Yeah. So usually in the report speech, we have three subjects implied. The subject number one, it's the person who says the information. The subject number two is the person who listens the information. And the subject number three is the person who repeats. So this one speaks, this one listens, and this one repeats. Right? That's the role for every single subject. But the subject number three, or the person who repeats the information, sometimes is the same person who speaks, you know? So it can be the person who speaks is the same person who repeats the information later. When the person says, ah, es que yo dije que, él dijo la información y ahora la está repitiendo. O ella dijo y ahora la está repitiendo. But also, it can be the person who listens the information. It's the same person who repeats the information. So it can be the person who says, okay, es que me dijo que, ready? So listens and then repeats the information. Or normally it's another different person who repeats the information that was spoken between other two people. Ah, es que tal persona le dijo a tal persona que tal cosa. Ready? Entonces, depending who's speaking and who's listening, also who is repeating the information, we are going to manage the subjects, right? Remember that we have different things that we can report. We can report sentences like, for example, statements, complete sentences with tense, or we can report things like, for example, request. Yeah. When we report something like a request, like an order, it's simply using to, and that's it. For example, if I say, no sé, let's say, don't use translator. It's an instruction, right? It's an instruction. So don't use translation. So, for example, if it's me, I said, ah, bueno, I told them. Yo les dije a ellos, I told them not to use translator. ¿Cierto? Simplemente con to porque es un request. Y esa es la parte más fácil de report speech. Pero, but if I use other different sentence, like a statement with tense, with a verb, we said, for example, I will be late tonight. Usually these expressions or these sentences, they include a tense, for example, tonight, future, yes? In the report, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Yes, of course, I said, ah, sí, I told them, lo mismo, the same. I told them that. Aquí ya no uso tú, sino que uso that, of course. But after that, I'm going to introduce again the subject. So I told them that of course, the verb is going to change. I have to go back one tense. So will is going to be reported with. ¿Con qué se reporta will? ¿Lo recuerdan?
Would.
Muy bien, very good,
Yeah,
Nika.
well,
So I told them that I would be late. Pero resulta que el tiempo, la expresión de tiempo también debe cambiar. ¿Por qué? Porque cuando yo dije esto, ya no es el mismo tiempo que cuando lo repetí. Por lo tanto, esa expresión de tiempo ya no es válida. ¿Ready? ¿Qué sucede? Voy a tener que incluir o cambiar las expresiones de tiempo de cercano a lejano. ¿Cómo así que de cercano a lejano? Es decir, cuando yo digo el día de hoy, cuando lo repito, digo ese día. Cuando yo digo ya, cuando lo reporto, digo en ese momento. ¿Ready? Entonces, guys, in this case, we have these adverbs of, esto es acá, here. These adverbs of time for changing, the time expressions. Ready? Example, when I use now in the direct speech, in the report speech is then. Yes? If I use today in the direct speech, in the report speech is that day. Entonces, ¿cómo cambiarlo de cercano, cuando yo lo digo en el momento, a lejano, cuando lo reporto tiempo después? Right? Entonces, por ejemplo, aquí dice, ah, ok, I told them that I would be late. ¿Cuándo? The original sentence was tonight. So I said, ah, I told them that I would be late.
The last night.
Not the last, porque no sabemos si fue exactamente la noche anterior. Si hubiera sido la noche anterior, bien. Pero en ese caso no sabemos si fue esa noche o la noche anterior. Entonces simplemente es esa noche en la que yo les dije tonight, esa noche. That's why tonight se reporta como that night. Ready? So he said, okay, I told them that I would be late that night. ¿Listo? ¿Ready? Claro, si la cosa fue la noche anterior, pues sí puedes usar last night. pero no siempre va a ser la noche anterior. Posiblemente yo les dije este mensaje hace 3 semanas. No podría funcionar en ese caso last night. Tendría que ser como más general in that night o that night. ¿Ready? Por ejemplo, here then puede ser then, pero también puede ser in that moment. In that moment, which is like en ese momento, cuando se dijo la afirmación. ¿Ready? Entonces, guys, yesterday quedaría como the previous day o the day before. Last day, last week, perdón. The previous week o the week before. ¿Mm? A year ago, a week ago, sería como the previous week o the week before, same. Tomorrow ya es al revés, entonces ya no es the previous o the before, sino the following day o the day after. Yes. The same. Next, the following week. For example, next week quedaría the following week o the week after. Here, en cuanto a espacio también lo cambiamos. Si yo digo here en el original, en el reporte lo cambio como there. Y con los demostrativos. Si usé cercano o demostrativo cercano, this and this, obviamente en el reporte uso that and those, porque ya es lejano. ¿Ya? Entonces, for example, if I say, bueno, I don't know, next week we will have a class 4. Yes? Y you said, bueno, ok. Si lo reporto yo, pues yo digo, I told them that bla, bla, bla. Pero supongamos que no lo reporto yo, lo reporta Laurita. ¿Cómo dirías, cómo reportarías esa oración, Lau?
He told, are
Yeah, you told. ¿A quién?
you told us
Exactly. You told us.
uh, that
Ujú.
we would have class 4.
When.
Mm, mm, the following week.
Exactly. The following o the week after. That's it, right? Pero muy bien. En este caso, yo en la oración original coloqué el complemento de tiempo al inicio y luego la oración. Lau lo reporta usando primero la oración y luego el complemento de tiempo. Perfecto, no hay problema porque es igualmente complemento de tiempo. Así que recuerden que los conectores pueden ir al inicio o al final, en ese caso, del complemento. ¿Listo? ¿Ready?
O sea que no podemos decir the next week.
Sí, también, the next week. En este caso, bueno, porque todavía estamos
Sí, en
hablando
ese
del
caso
futuro.
sí.
Ujú.
Ah, ok, ok.
But of course. Ready? Entonces, in that
Ok.
case, you can use that, right? Entonces, guys, el report speech es, pues, fácil, ustedes ya lo saben manejar, pero también tienen que tener en cuenta que el tiempo de la historia va a cambiar. Entonces, así como usé los conectores atrás para conectar las diferentes detalles de la historia, aquí debo usar los adverbios de tiempo para dar claridad sobre cuándo fue que se dijo esa información que estoy reportando. ¿Vale? Por eso también es importante que hagamos el cambio en el report speech, ¿vale? Questions ahí, questions, difficulties, anything. Puede llegar a ser un poquito confuso a veces.
No, teacher, ya.
Sí, profe, utilizarlos es confuso, pero sí es coherente. Solo que es.
Sí.
Ok, very good. Listo, my dear people. Entonces, so, you're going to have 2 minutes. What I want you to do is simply to think. Think on a story. Tell me one impressive story, one anecdote of your life, one piece of news, something short, not too long. Something, for example, así de sencillo. Obviamente eso está muy largo, right? But something closer, shorter, yes? Teacher, once I was blah, blah, blah. Any kind of story, puede ser a piece of news, puede ser something related to yourself, can be real, can be fake, whatever that you want. Just try to use the connectors and the tenses that we use, ready? Entonces, bajarles por aquí no sé si o el ejemplo de la noticia, what do you prefer? ¿Qué les digo? I don't know, this one, much better, right? So guide yourself, piénsenlo, una historia cortita, something that you want to tell me, algo que les pasó, algo que les contaron de pronto en report speech también, como ustedes quieran, as you prefer. Bueno, people. So, what do you think? Ready? Do you develop one short story? Ready, guys? So, what you got for me? So, tell me one story.
I know. One day when I was 17 years old, I was living to the USA. One day I was singing aloud, I Kiss a Gay by Katy Perry. Then my cousin asked me, "Why are you singing that song?" Obviously, I didn't know the meaning. Finally, I looked for the meaning and I felt embarrassed.
So, your cousin was a man or a woman?
A man.
So obviously he thought that you were like a lesbian or something like that, right? Because of
Yeah,
the lyrics of the song.
yeah. I
Oh,
kiss the girl.
oh
Have you
my.
ever hit it?
Of
Listened?
course, I have listened. I mean, I have not read the lyrics, but for the title, I can deduce that that it's kind of something like that.
Ah, yes. And
Okay.
that's it.
Great, excellent. So you see, you just use simple past continuous, creating the story. Like I was living in the US, right? Oh, okay, great. That makes me all more contextualized to the story. Great. So thank you, Larita. That's it. And Nico, what you got for me, right?
Okay.
Hmm. It all started a few years ago when my parents decided to renovate our old house.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't studying the old blueprints from 1918 when
Oof.
we found a hidden room behind a bookshelf, a library.
No way.
And I have been running around the house trying to figure it out how to open it, but I haven't had any luck. What I need to know it was inside, but my parents say we have failed to open it and so just forgotten about it.
Ay, my God. Very creepy, no? Very, very spooky because, my God,
Yes.
a forgotten room behind the bookshelf. Oh, my God. Okay, Nico. But until this moment, have you opened it? No.
No, we can't.
But better that way. But probably it's for the best, no? So great. Okay, guys. So yeah, that's the idea, no? So it was like sometimes difficult to create a story because introducing new details it's sometimes hard because we don't know how to connect them. If it's but that is continuous, that is simple. What connector should I use here, right? but you did it correctly. Ready? So it's a good idea to practice more and more, to try to tell a story even longer and longer and longer with more details, with more details. So you are forced to use more and more connectors, also to divide with punctuation, so on and so on. Ready? Guys, thank you for being here. See you the next class, the next week with only one class, which is class number 4. It's only one class. So see you there. Have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week. Enjoy. See you next
Thank
week.
you, teacher.
Thanks,
Bye,
teacher.
guys.
You too.
Have
Take
a
care.
good
Bye,
You
guys.
weekend.
too.
Bye bye.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.